Hi everyone, I'm Shannon. This is the story of how I discovered my husband of 12 years was secretly transferring our life savings to his mistress right under my nose. One morning, I noticed unusual bank notifications on his phone while he was in the shower, so I set up a hidden recording device in our home office. And that's when I heard him confess everything to her. He didn't just steal our money. He was planning to leave me completely bankrupt while telling our friends I had a gambling problem. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What would you do if the man who promised to love you forever was systematically destroying your financial future? Would you confront him immediately, or would you gather evidence first? Let me tell you what I did. The Seattle rain hadn't stopped for 3 days straight. It drummed against the roof of our Victorian home, the home we had spent 8 years renovating together, the home Cyrus had promised would be where we'd grow old together. I stood in our kitchen, warming my hands around a mug of chamomile tea, watching rivulets of water streak down the window like tears I was too numb to cry. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see into the living room where Cyrus sat hunched over, his laptop, his face illuminated by the blue glow of the screen. He'd been working late for months now, investment strategy meetings, client dinners, emergency portfolio rescues. That's what he always told me when he'd come home smelling faintly of a perfume I didn't wear. "I'm heading up," he called out, closing his laptop with a decisive snap. "Got an early meeting with the Morgan account team tomorrow." "Another early meeting?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral, conversational. He didn't look at me directly. Hadn't truly looked at me in months. "Yeah, big client, potentially 7 figures. He stood, stretching. "Don't wait up." I nodded, not trusting my voice. 8 months ago, I would have kissed him goodnight, maybe brought him tea in bed. Now, we moved around each other like ghostly roommates, sharing space but never truly connecting. After I heard the shower running upstairs, I remained in the kitchen, listening to the rain and the distant sounds of water pipes groaning in our old house. That's when his phone, forgotten on the counter, lit up with a notification. "Transfer complete. $2,500 from joint savings to account number 4389. I froze, my mug halfway to my lips. Joint savings. Our joint savings. The account we'd been building for years, for emergencies, for our future. My heart began a slow, painful pounding in my chest. It wasn't the first unusual notification I'd seen. 3 weeks earlier, I'd noticed a similar alert when his phone lay on the coffee table. When I'd asked him about it, he'd laughed it off. Just moving money between our accounts for tax purposes, he'd said. Investment strategy. Nothing to worry about. I believed him then. Or maybe I wanted to believe him. Cyrus was the financial expert, after all. The investment banker with an MBA from Wharton who managed not just our money, but the wealth of Seattle's elite. I was the high school English teacher who still balanced her checkbook by hand. But $12,500, that wasn't moving money around. That was moving money away. With trembling fingers, I picked up his phone. It was locked, of course. Cyrus was nothing, if not careful. But the notification was still visible on the screen, taunting me. Account number 4389. I didn't recognize that account number. It wasn't our checking, our savings, or even his personal account. It was something else entirely. I set the phone down exactly as I'd found it and moved to the window, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. Outside, the rain transformed our garden into a blurry watercolor, the roses we'd planted together, now bent and battered by the downpour. The shower stopped running upstairs. I heard Cyrus moving around, the familiar creaks of floorboards that I could identify with my eyes closed, 3 steps to the dresser, 4 to the bed. The sounds of a shared life, a life I thought was built on trust. That night, I lay beside him in our king-sized bed, listening to his even breathing. 12 years of marriage, and for the first time, I felt like I was sleeping next to a stranger. My mind raced with questions I was afraid to ask, connecting dots I didn't want to connect. The next morning, Cyrus left early as promised, kissing my cheek in a perfunctory gesture that felt more like habit than affection. I called in sick to school, something I rarely did, claiming a migraine. It wasn't entirely a lie. My head was pounding with unformed suspicions and fears. I sat at our kitchen table for a long time, staring at nothing, hands wrapped around another mug of tea gone, cold. Then I made a decision. 30 minutes later, I was standing in an electronics store, speaking in a low voice to a sales associate named Betty. "It's for a school project," I lied, the words sticking in my throat. "Something small, discreet." Betty didn't look convinced, but she didn't ask questions either. She showed me a selection of recording devices, small enough to hide in a book, behind a picture frame, under a desk. "This one has the best audio quality," she said, indicating a sleek black device no bigger than a USB drive. "Voice activated, so it only records when someone's speaking. Battery lasts about 36 hours. I bought it, along with 2 more like it, my credit card burning in my hand like a brand of shame. This wasn't me. I wasn't the kind of woman who spied on her husband, who violated the trust that was supposed to be the foundation of our marriage. But then again, maybe I wasn't the kind of woman whose husband secretly transferred thousands of dollars to unknown accounts either. That afternoon, while Cyrus was still at work, I placed the first device in his home office, tucked carefully behind the row of financial reference books he never touched but kept for appearances. I put the second in the living room, hidden in the hollow base of a decorative vase. The third went into my purse, a backup, I told myself, though for what exactly I wasn't sure. Then I waited, moving through our house like a ghost, my heart pounding every time I looked at the places where my secrets now hid. The rain continued to fall outside, washing away spring, washing away certainties. What would those little devices capture? Part of me hoped for nothing, a misunderstanding, an innocent explanation that would make me feel foolish but relieved. Another part of me, a part growing stronger by the hour, knew better. I need to back up a little bit and tell you how we got here, how Cyrus and I built a life that I thought was unshakable. We met 15 years ago at a charity gala in downtown Seattle. I was there with my school's fundraising committee. He was a rising star at Montgomery Financial Partners. I remember he wore a blue tie that matched his eyes, and he talked about investment strategies with such passion that even I, someone who found finance about as exciting as watching paint dry, was captivated. We were married within 2 years. The wedding was small but elegant, overlooking Puget Sound on a rare, perfectly sunny Seattle day. My parents, both retired teachers, had whispered concerns about how different our worlds were, the public school teacher and the investment banker. But love has a way of making those differences seem romantic rather than problematic. For the first decade, our marriage was everything I'd hoped for. We bought our Victorian home in Queen Anne when it was barely habitable, cracked foundations, ancient plumbing, wiring that made our inspector visibly wince. But we saw the potential. Every weekend for years, we'd work on one project or another. Cyrus would research the best materials. I'd plan the designs. We built something beautiful together, room by room. Financially, we were cautious at first. Despite his career, Cyrus was surprisingly conservative with our personal finances. "I see too many people lose everything from taking unnecessary risks," he'd tell me. We kept separate accounts for our personal spending but maintained joint savings for our future, retirement, maybe children someday, though as the years passed, that conversation happened less frequently. 3 years ago, everything shifted. Cyrus was promoted to senior investment director at Montgomery. Suddenly, our comfortable life upgraded dramatically. Dinner reservations at restaurants with month-long waiting lists, weekend trips to wine country, a sleek black Audi replaced his practical sedan. When I expressed concern about the increased spending, he'd smile that charming smile and say, "Shannon, we've been careful for years. It's time to enjoy what we've earned." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The we felt generous. His salary had always dwarfed my teacher's income. But I'd contributed what I could to our shared life, both financially and otherwise. I was the one who kept our home running, who maintained relationships with friends and planned holidays, who made sure bills were paid on time when he was traveling for work. Looking back, I can pinpoint when the cracks began to form. Last September, around our anniversary. Cyrus forgot, for the first time in our marriage. When I mentioned it over breakfast, he looked genuinely stricken, promised to make it up to me. That weekend, he surprised me with a diamond bracelet that must have cost more than my monthly salary. I wore it to school on Monday, showed it to my colleague and friend Crystal during lunch break. "It's gorgeous," she said, examining the delicate diamonds. Though I'm surprised he went with something so traditional. Doesn't really seem like your style. She was right. I'd always preferred unique, artisan jewelry, pieces with stories behind them. This bracelet, beautiful as it was, could have been purchased for any woman. That same month, the late meetings began. The business trips extended. His phone, once casually left around our home, became permanently attached to his hand. When it did ring in my presence, he'd step away to answer. "Client confidentiality," he'd explain with an apologetic shrug. I'm not naive. I recognized the classic signs. But after 12 years together, I wouldn't jump to conclusions. Marriages go through phases. People get busy. Trust is a choice you make every day. So I chose trust, even as the distance between us grew. Even as he began declining dinner invitations from our longtime friends. Even as our conversations became superficial exchanges about schedules and household logistics. Winter came, and with it, Seattle's perpetual gray skies and rain. Our home, once filled with weekend brunches and friends dropping by, grew quiet except for the sound of raindrops and the increasingly rare moments when we were both there. At Christmas, we visited his parents in their retirement community in Phoenix. His mother, Cheryl, pulled me aside during gift unwrapping. "Is everything all right with you two?" she asked quietly, her eyes concerned under her perfectly colored hair. "Of course," I answered automatically. "Why do you ask?" She patted my hand. "A mother knows when her son is troubled, and you've lost that spark in your eyes." I brushed off her concerns, blamed it on end-of-semester exhaustion, but her words settled into me like a stone. In January, I noticed the first unusual bank activity. A notification on his phone about a transfer from our joint savings, $8,000 to an account I didn't recognize. When I asked about it that evening, Cyrus explained he was diversifying some of our investments, taking advantage of market conditions. "I could explain the strategy," he offered, reaching for a notepad, "but it involves some complicated leveraging techniques." I waved away the explanation, embarrassed by my suspicion, by my financial ignorance. This was his world, after all. I trusted him with our money just as he trusted me to nurture our home, to remember his mother's birthday, to keep track of furnace maintenance and roof inspections. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have imagined, was that this explanation was the first thread in an elaborate tapestry of lies. That while I was grading essays at our dining room table, Cyrus was systematically dismantling the financial security we'd spent years building together. February brought Valentine's Day. Cyrus was in Chicago for a conference, sent flowers and an expensive bottle of perfume. It wasn't a scent I would have chosen for myself. Too floral, too young somehow. I displayed it on my dresser but never wore it. March arrived with hints of spring and another notification glimpsed on his phone. Another transfer, larger this time. Again, the explanation was ready, rehearsed. tax strategies, investment opportunities too complex to explain. By April, when I saw that $2,500 transfer notification while Cyrus was in the shower, something had shifted in me. The teachers I work with often talk about teachable moments, those instances when a student is perfectly primed to absorb a lesson. This was my teachable moment. The lesson? Trust your instincts. Which is why, on that rainy afternoon, I found myself hiding recording devices in my own home, waiting to hear what my husband said when he thought I wasn't listening. 2 days passed before I had the courage to check the recordings. 2 days of moving through our home like a ghost, of smiling at Cyrus over breakfast while my stomach churned with anxiety. 2 days of teaching The Great Gatsby to my seniors, talking about deception and the American dream, while my own life felt increasingly like fiction. On the 3rd day, Cyrus left for what he called a client dinner in Bellevue. He kissed my cheek at the door, his cologne too strong, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Don't wait up," he said, straightening his tie. The blue one I'd given him 3 Christmases ago. "These Westbrook people like to talk." I nodded, playing my part perfectly. "Drive safe. It's supposed to rain again." The moment his car pulled away from the curb, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Whatever I was about to discover, at least, I would know the truth. Uncertainty is its own kind of prison. I retrieved the device from his office first, my hands steady despite the gravity of what I was doing. The small black rectangle felt heavier than its actual weight, heavy with potential revelations, with the power to either heal my suspicions or confirm them. Sitting at the kitchen table, neutral territory, I connected the device to my laptop and opened the audio files. Most contained nothing significant. Cyrus on work calls, the cleaning service vacuuming, the ambient sounds of our home. I was beginning to think I'd overreacted when I reached the recordings from yesterday afternoon. Cyrus's voice came through clearly. I know. It's taking longer than we planned." A pause. He was on the phone. "The joint account is almost cleared out. Another 2 transfers should do it." My breath caught in my throat. "She doesn't check the statements, Jolene. Never has. Financial literacy isn't exactly her strong suit." Jolene. The name hit me like a physical blow. Who was Jolene? No, she has no idea about the Cayman account. That was established before we even met. A secret. Account? My hands began to shake. "Look, I've got this under control. By June, everything will be moved. You and I can start fresh. Just like we planned." The room seemed to tilt around me. Start fresh? With another woman? 12 years is a long investment, baby, but the payoff will be worth it. Shannon has no prenup, no separate assets worth mentioning. Her teacher's pension is decades away. Once I clear out the accounts, she'll have nothing. I couldn't breathe. The casual cruelty in his voice, so different from the man I thought I'd married, made me physically ill. I paused the recording, stumbled to the bathroom, and retched until there was nothing left but bitter bile. When I returned to the kitchen, I forced myself to continue listening. "The divorce filing is ready," Cyrus was saying, his voice cool and professional, as if discussing a business transaction rather than the dismantling of our marriage. "My attorney says with her salary, I might even qualify for alimony." A laugh. His laugh, but harder, colder than I'd ever heard it. "No, she won't fight it. Shannon avoids conflict like it's a disease. Always has. By the time she figures out what's happening, the money will be gone." Untraceable. Another pause. "I've already started telling people about her spending habits. Just subtle things. Mentioning how worried I am about her online shopping, how credit card bills keep mysteriously increasing. Noah at work thinks she might have a gambling problem." Noah, his colleague, someone we'd had dinner with just last month. I'd helped Noah's wife pick out a birthday gift for him. And now he thought I was a gambling addict? The Seattle house will have to be sold, of course. But the market's good, and my name is the only one on the vacation property in San Juan. She Doesn't even know it exists. A vacation property? In the San Juan Islands? My mind struggled to process this new information. We'd talked about buying a weekend place for years, had even looked at listings occasionally. But Cyrus always said the timing wasn't right, the market too volatile. He'd bought one anyway, without me. For them. I should go. She'll be wondering where I am. A soft chuckle. Don't worry. 2 more months and we won't have to sneak around anymore. I love you, Jolene. This will all be worth it. The recording ended. I sat frozen at our kitchen table, the rain pattering against the windows like a mocking soundtrack to my collapsing world. I checked the second device almost mechanically, my body operating on autopilot while my mind struggled to absorb the betrayal. This recording, from our living room, captured a different conversation from earlier the same day. Cyrus was speaking to someone named Leon, his financial advisor from what I could gather. The transfers need to look legitimate, Cyrus was saying. If she does eventually get suspicious and brings in a forensic accountant, I need a paper trail that makes sense. That's risky, Leon replied, his voice cautious. These amounts aren't small, Cyrus. That's why I'm paying you the big bucks, Cyrus said, a smile in his voice. Create backdated investment documents. Make it look like these were legitimate business transactions from the joint account to my personal LLC. And what about the Cayman transfers? Those are untraceable. The shell company is solid, 3 layers deep. Even if she somehow discovered it existed, which she won't, she'd never be able to prove the money came from our joint accounts. And you're sure she doesn't suspect anything? Leon asked. Cyrus laughed. That same cold laugh that didn't belong to the man I thought I knew. Shannon? She still believes I forgot our anniversary last year. She has no idea I was in Cabo with Jolene that weekend. Every word was another knife. I'd spent that anniversary weekend alone, telling myself it was okay, that work sometimes had to come first, that marriage was about understanding and compromise. Once everything's transferred, Cyrus continued, I'll file the divorce papers. Clean break. No assets left for her to claim. What about the prenup? There isn't one. I made sure of that before we got married. Played the romantic, said I believed in us too much to need one. Best decision I ever made. I stopped the recording, unable to bear any more. Outside, the rain had transformed into a thunderstorm, lightning occasionally illuminating our kitchen in harsh white flashes. It seemed fitting, the violence of the weather matching the violence. Being done to my life, my future, my trust. Everything I believed about my marriage had been a lie. While I'd been grading papers and renovating our home, planning our future, Cyrus had been systematically preparing to leave me with nothing. Not just brokenhearted, but destitute. The man I'd shared a bed with for 12 years had become my enemy, without my even knowing we were at war. I didn't cry that night. Maybe I was in shock. Or maybe something inside me had hardened the moment I heard Cyrus speak so callously about destroying my life. Instead of tears, I felt a cold clarity descend, a razor-sharp focus I'd never experienced before. By the time Cyrus's headlights swept across our bedroom wall at 11:43 p.m., I had formulated the beginnings of a plan. I closed my eyes and steadied, my breathing as he entered the room, pretending to be asleep. He moved quietly in the darkness, and I felt the mattress dip as he slid in beside me. The scent of unfamiliar perfume clung to him, no longer disguised as an expensive restaurant or client meeting. How had I missed it for so long? In the morning, I performed normalcy like an award-winning actress, smiling over coffee, asking about his evening, mentioning an upcoming school fundraiser. If Cyrus noticed anything different about me, he didn't show it. His performance was equally flawless. The attentive husband, the busy professional, the man with nothing to hide. I'll be home late again tonight, he said, adjusting his cufflinks. Platinum, a gift from me on our 10th anniversary. Quarterly reports due. No problem, I replied, refilling his coffee mug. "I have papers to grade anyway." As soon as he left, I began my investigation in earnest. First, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with financially. Despite what Cyrus believed about my financial literacy, I wasn't completely ignorant. I'd simply trusted him to handle our investments because finance was his profession, his passion. That trust had been weaponized against me. I started with our joint account statements. Accessing our online banking was easy. Cyrus had set up the password years ago, our wedding date, and never changed it. Arrogance, I realized now. He never thought I'd look closely. The statements confirmed what I'd heard on the recordings. Systematic transfers had been draining our savings for months. $8,000 here, $2,500 there. Sometimes smaller amounts of $3,000 or $5,000. Each withdrawal described as investment transfer or portfolio allocation. The pattern had accelerated recently. In the past month alone, over $45,000 had disappeared. I downloaded and printed every statement for the past year, highlighting each suspicious transaction, noting dates and amounts in a separate notebook. The total made me physically ill, $287,650, almost our entire joint savings. Next, I turned to our investment accounts. These were trickier. Cyrus managed these directly through his firm. I found the quarterly statements in his home office, filed, neatly in a cabinet he never bothered to lock. Why would he? He'd constructed our entire relationship around my trust and financial dependence. The investment reports showed a similar pattern of withdrawals, but with an added layer of deception. Funds weren't just being moved, they were being liquidated. Entirely. Investments we'd built over years, the security we'd planned for retirement, all methodically dismantled. I took photos of every page with my phone, creating digital copies I immediately backed up to a private cloud account. Then I carefully returned the documents exactly as I'd found them. My next step required more courage. I called in sick to school for the second day that week, something I'd never done before, and drove to our bank. The branch manager, Mr. Faulkner, had handled our accounts for years and knew both of us. "Mrs. Winters," he greeted me with a smile. "This is unexpected. How can I help you today?" I'd rehearsed this conversation in my car. "I'm doing some financial planning," I explained, returning his smile. "Cyrus is so busy with his clients that our personal finances sometimes get neglected. I thought I'd surprise him by organizing things." Mr. Faulkner nodded approvingly. "That's thoughtful of you. What information do you need?" "I'd like a complete account history for the past 2 years. All accounts, including any I might not be aware of." A flicker of something, hesitation perhaps, crossed his face. "I can provide histories for your joint accounts, of course, and any individual accounts in your name. But for accounts solely in Mr. Winter's name, of course," I said quickly. "I understand privacy concerns. Just the joint accounts then, please, and—" I hesitated, then pushed forward. "Could you tell me if there have been any recent changes to account access or permissions?" Mr. Faulkner typed something into his computer, then frowned slightly. "Actually, there was a change 3 weeks ago. Mr. Winters removed you as an authorized user on 2 of your joint investment accounts." The confirmation felt like a punch to the stomach, but I kept my expression neutral. "Oh? That must have been a mistake. I'll mention it to him." Armed with the bank statements, I made my next stop at a small law office downtown, where I'd made an appointment with a name I'd found through careful research. Patricia Winters. No relation to us. A divorce attorney specializing in high-asset cases and financial fraud. Patricia was in her 50s, with sharp eyes behind stylish glasses and the no-nonsense manner of someone who'd seen it all. I laid out what I knew: the recordings, the bank statements, the systematic emptying of our accounts. "He's moving quickly," she said, reviewing the documents. "These aren't impulsive withdrawals. This is a calculated exit strategy." He mentioned a Cayman account, I said. And something about shell companies. Patricia's expression hardened. Offshore accounts complicate things, but they're not insurmountable obstacles. The recordings are extremely valuable, though legally complicated. Are they admissible? In court, I mean? Washington is a two-party consent state for recordings, she explained. Technically, recording him without consent could be problematic. However, she held up a finger. Given the nature of what you've uncovered, we might have options. Financial. Fraud creates certain exceptions, she leaned forward. What's most critical now is gathering everything you can without alerting him to your knowledge. Bank statements, investment reports, tax returns for the past 5 years at minimum. Property deeds, vehicle titles, insurance policies. Any mention of accounts or properties you weren't aware of. Like the San Juan property, I said softly. Exactly. We need to move quickly but carefully. If he realizes you know, he'll accelerate his plan. What about the recordings? Keep making them, she advised. They may not all be admissible in court, but they're invaluable for our strategy. And Shannon? Her eyes met mine. Don't confront him, not yet. The element of surprise is the only advantage you have right now. I left Patricia's office with a detailed checklist and a retainer agreement I signed using money from my personal checking account, a modest teacher's savings I'd maintained separately throughout our marriage. It wasn't much, but it was mine, untouched by Cyrus's machinations. Back home, I continued my investigation, searching for any information about the San Juan property. In Cyrus's home office, hidden behind tax documents from 3 years ago, I found it. Property records for a waterfront cabin on Lopez Island, purchased 18 months earlier for $1.2 million. The deed listed only his name, $1.2 million money. That could only have come from our joint funds, yet I'd known nothing about this purchase. The betrayal wasn't just about the affair, or even the theft of our savings. It was about the systematic construction of a separate life, brick by brick, using resources that should have secured our future together. As I photographed the documents, I noticed something else, a handwritten note in the margin of the purchase agreement. Jay will love the sunset view. Jay Jolene. He'd bought their love nest with our money. That night, when Cyrus returned home, I played my role perfectly. Dinner was waiting, conversation light. I asked about his day and listened attentively to his lies. All the while, the recording devices captured every word, every fabrication, evidence accumulating with each passing hour. You seem tired, he commented as we cleaned up after dinner, a rare moment of actual perception. I smiled. Just end-of-year school stress, nothing to worry about. You should take a weekend for yourself, he suggested, his thoughtfulness so convincing that for a split second, I almost forgot what I knew. Maybe visit your sister in Portland? Maybe I will, I said, realizing immediately what he wanted. The house to himself. For her. For Jolene. I turned away, ostensibly to wipe down the counter, but actually to hide the flash of rage that I couldn't quite suppress. In that moment, I made a decision. I wouldn't just gather evidence, I would fight back. I would protect what was mine. Cyrus hadn't just betrayed our marriage, he'd declared financial war. And he was about to discover that this particular English teacher was a quick study in warfare. The following weekend, I told Cyrus I'd take his advice and visit my sister in Portland. The relief on his face was barely concealed. Another weekend for him and Jolene. Another opportunity to plan their future on the ruins of mine. That's a great idea, he said, already reaching for his phone. You deserve a break. I packed a small overnight bag, kissed him goodbye on Friday afternoon, and drove away from our house. But I didn't go to Portland. Instead, I checked into a small hotel downtown, one that wouldn't appear on our joint credit card statements. From this temporary command center, I initiated what Patricia had called financial triage. First, I opened a new bank account at Ata. Different bank using my personal ID and my maiden name as an additional signatory, something Patricia had suggested as a legal way to protect any funds I could secure. Next, I moved the entirety of my personal checking and savings accounts into this new protected account, approximately $42,000 I'd saved from my teaching salary over the years. It wasn't much compared to what Cyrus had stolen, but it was something. Patricia had been clear. In cases of financial fraud, conventional rules about marital assets can sometimes be suspended. Your priority is to secure whatever you legally can before it all disappears. My next step was both the most difficult and the most necessary. I called my parents. Mom answered on the second ring. "Shannon, what a nice surprise. How are you, honey?" "Not great, Mom," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I need to tell you something, and it's going to be hard to hear." There was a pause. Then her voice, instantly serious. "What's happened?" I told them everything. The recordings, the affair, the systematic theft of our joint savings. Mom gasped when I mentioned the $287,650. Dad remained silent, but I could hear his breathing change, growing more measured, controlled, the way it did when he was truly angry. "That son of a bitch," he finally said when I finished. Dad rarely swore. "Shannon, come home. Stay with us while you figure this out." "I can't, Dad. Not yet. If Cyrus realizes I know, he'll accelerate everything. I need to secure what I can." "First, you need money," Mom said, cutting to the heart of it. "I've spoken to a lawyer," I explained. "She's good, but expensive, and I might need funds for forensic accountants, court filings." "We're transferring $50,000 to you today," Dad said firmly. "It's the bulk of our emergency fund, but this is exactly what it's for." I started to protest, but Mom cut me off. "This isn't charity, Shannon. It's family. When your father had his heart attack 5 years ago, who paid for the specialists not? Covered by insurance? Who helped us refinance the house to make it more accessible?" She was right. I'd used much of my savings then to help them through that crisis. I hadn't thought twice about it. "Thank you," I said, tears finally breaking through my carefully maintained composure. "I promise I'll pay you back." "You focus on nailing that bastard to the wall," Dad said. "That'll be repayment enough." With my parents' help securing my immediate financial needs, I moved to the next phase of Patricia's plan, documenting every asset we owned. Saturday morning, I returned to our home while Cyrus was supposedly at the office, though I suspected he was actually at the San Juan property with Jolene. I moved through our house methodically, photographing everything of significant value: artwork, furniture, electronics, jewelry. I located and copied all insurance policies, especially the riders for my engagement ring and the antique Rolex I'd given Cyrus for our 10th anniversary. I found and documented titles for both our vehicles. In his closet, I discovered a fireproof safe I'd always known about but never had reason to open. The combination, 1945, was his father's birth year, something Cyrus had mentioned once in passing. Inside, I found more property documents for the San Juan house, statements for accounts I'd never seen before, and a second passport. The passport struck me as odd, until I remembered something from the recordings. The shell company is solid. 3 layers deep. Was Cyrus planning to leave the country if things went badly? I photographed everything, including the passport, before carefully returning it all exactly as I'd found it. By Saturday afternoon, I had compiled a comprehensive digital archive of our marital assets, backed up in multiple locations, my new laptop, purchased with cash, my secure cloud account, and a USB drive I mailed to my parents for safekeeping. Then came the most difficult part of Patricia's plan. "You need to secure copies of the recordings in a way he can't delete or claim are fabricated," she had advised. So I did something I never imagined doing. I contacted Noah, Cyrus's colleague, the same Noah who had been told I had a gambling problem. We met at a coffee shop far from our usual neighborhoods. Noah looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat as I approached. "Shannon, this is unexpected," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Thank you for meeting me," I replied, sliding into the seat across from him. "I'll be direct. Cyrus is having an affair and systematically emptying our accounts. He's been telling people I have problems, gambling, overspending, to cover his tracks." Noah's discomfort intensified. "I don't want to get involved in personal—" "He's defrauding clients too," I interrupted, taking a calculated risk. Something in the recordings had suggested Cyrus's financial misconduct might extend beyond our marriage, and Noah's sudden pallor confirmed my suspicion. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The same shell companies he's using to hide our marital assets. They're connected to client funds too, aren't they?" Noah glanced around the coffee shop nervously. "How do you know about that?" "I have recordings," I said simply. "Cyrus talking about everything, the affair, the fraud, all of it." Noah's face went from pale to ashen. "If this gets out—" "I don't want to hurt the firm or its clients," I assured him. "My issue is with Cyrus, not Montgomery Financial. But I need a witness to authenticate these recordings, someone who knows his voice, who can verify the conversations happened." "Why me?" "Because you have as much to lose as the firm does if Cyrus's activities come to light. You've been working closely with him on the Westbrook accounts, right?" Noah stared at me, reassessing. "You're not what he described at all, are you?" "No. And I suspect many things aren't what Cyrus has described." After a long pause, Noah nodded. "What do you need me to do?" "Listen to some recordings. Sign an affidavit confirming it's Cyrus's voice and that the conversations happened. As recorded, that's all." He agreed, reluctantly but firmly. We moved to his car for privacy, and I played selected portions of the recordings, enough to establish Cyrus's identity and the nature of his financial schemes, but nothing that would implicate Noah directly. When the final recording ended, Noah sat in silence for a full minute. Then he looked at me with something like respect. "I'll sign whatever you need," he said quietly. "And Shannon, I'm sorry about believing him." That night, back in my hotel room, I called Patricia and updated her on my progress. "You've done more in 2 days than most clients do in 2 weeks, she said approvingly. "Monday morning we file emergency motions to freeze the remaining assets and for temporary financial support. What about the recordings?" "With a witness authentication, they become much stronger evidence. We may not be able to use them directly in court due to the 2-party consent issue, but they give us a roadmap to what he's hidden. That's invaluable." As I ended the call, a text came through from Cyrus. "How's Portland? Say hi to Emily for me." Emily, my sister. The sister he knew I was supposedly visiting. I texted back a simple, "Will do. Having a great time." Another lie in a marriage built on them. But this time, the deception was mine, and it served a purpose. Cyrus believed he was the only one capable of strategic thinking, of careful planning. He was about to discover just how wrong he was. Monday morning would be the beginning of the end, the first public move in a battle he didn't even know was coming. Monday morning arrived with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. I woke before dawn. In my hotel room, showered and dressed with deliberate care, a navy blue suit I'd worn to parent-teacher conferences, understated pearl earrings that had been my grandmother's, minimal makeup. I wanted to look composed, professional, unshakable. Patricia had arranged to meet me at the King County Courthouse at 8:30 a.m. The emergency motions had been prepared over the weekend, one to freeze all marital assets pending divorce proceedings, another for temporary financial support given the evidence of financial misconduct. Noah's signed affidavit authenticating the recordings was included in our filing, along with bank statements showing the systematic withdrawals. As I drove downtown, my phone buzzed with a text from Cyrus. "In meetings all day. Don't wait up." The casual deception that had once wounded me now felt almost comical. While he thought I was at home grading papers, blissfully ignorant, I was about to detonate his carefully constructed exit plan. Patricia was waiting on the courthouse steps. Immaculate in a charcoal suit, a leather portfolio tucked under her arm. "Ready?" she asked simply. I nodded. More than ready. Inside, we filed the emergency motions and were assigned a hearing with Judge Terrell for Wednesday morning, faster than Patricia had anticipated. "It helps that we have solid documentation," she explained as we descended the courthouse steps. "Many cases like yours involve suspicions without proof. You've given us a strong starting position." We were walking toward the parking garage when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Is this Shannon Winters?" a woman's voice asked. She sounded young, professional. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Crystal Torres. I'm an account manager at First Northwest Bank." There was a hesitation in her voice. "I'm calling about some unusual activity on your joint accounts with Cyrus Winters." My heart stuttered. "What kind of unusual activity?" "There have been multiple large withdrawals this morning, attempting to empty the accounts completely. Given the amounts and pattern, our fraud department flagged them for review." I glanced at Patricia, who had stopped walking and was watching, my face intently. "How much?" I asked, my voice steady despite my racing pulse. "Attempts to withdraw the remaining balance, approximately $123,000 across 3 accounts. The last of our joint savings, what Cyrus hadn't already siphoned away. He was making his final move. These withdrawals weren't authorized by me," I said firmly. "Can you freeze the accounts immediately?" "They've already been temporarily frozen pending verification," Crystal explained. "That's why I'm calling. Mr. Winters attempted the withdrawals in person at our downtown branch about 30 minutes ago. He became rather insistent when informed of the hold. I filed emergency motions this morning to freeze all marital assets," I told her. "My attorney is with me now if you need verification." Patricia took the phone, identified herself, and provided the case number from our filing. When she handed the phone back, Crystal's tone had changed. "Mrs. Winters, given the legal filing and the suspicious withdrawal pattern, will maintain the freeze on all joint accounts. You should know that Mr. Winters was quite angry when he left the branch. He mentioned something about contacting his lawyer." After thanking her and ending the call, I turned to Patricia. "He knows." She nodded grimly. "Sooner than we hoped, but not entirely unexpected. The court filings would have been served to him by end of day anyway. This just accelerates our timeline." She checked her watch. "Let's move up our next steps. Are you still staying at the hotel?" "Yes." "Good. Don't go home yet. He'll be looking for you." As if on cue, my phone lit up with Cyrus's number. Patricia shook her head. "Don't answer. Let him wonder where you are and what you know. We need to secure the recordings and evidence first." We drove separately to Patricia's office, a precaution in case Cyrus was looking for my car. Once safely inside her corner office overlooking Elliott Bay, Patricia brought in a young associate, named Megan, and a paralegal. They began organizing our evidence for Wednesday's hearing while Patricia made calls to the financial institutions holding our investment accounts. "We need to move quickly," she explained between calls. "He's probably trying to access everything now that he knows you've discovered him." My phone continued to ring throughout the morning, Cyrus calling repeatedly, then texting with escalating urgency. "Where are you? We need to talk now. Whatever you think you know, you're wrong." And finally, "You have no idea what you're doing, Shannon. Stop this before you ruin everything." I showed the last message to Patricia, who smiled thinly. Textbook. First denial, then blame shifting. Let's see how he reacts to this. She drafted a text for me to send. "I know about Jolene. I know about the Cayman accounts. I know about Lopez Island. Don't contact me again except through my attorney, Patricia Winters. I hit send, and the response was immediate, a phone call that I declined. Now we wait, Patricia said. We didn't wait long. Less than an hour later, Patricia's receptionist buzzed to inform her that someone from Montgomery Financial Partners was on the line. Not Cyrus, but Curtis Blackwood, the firm's chief compliance. Officer Patricia put the call on speaker. This is Patricia Winters. Ms. Winters, my name is Curtis Blackwood from Montgomery Financial. I understand you're representing Shannon Winters in a matter against Cyrus Winters, one of our investment directors. That's correct. There was a pause, then. We've become aware of some concerning activities involving Mr. Winters and client accounts. Given your filing this morning and certain internal reviews we've initiated, we believe our interests may temporarily align. Patricia raised an eyebrow at me. Go on, Mr. Blackwood. We'd like to share some information that may be relevant to your case in exchange for certain assurances regarding our firm's reputation. After the call ended, Patricia turned to me with a grim satisfaction. Montgomery is cutting him loose. They're conducting an internal audit and have already found irregularities in client accounts, the same shell company structure he used to hide your assets. The revelation struck me with unexpected force. Cyrus hadn't just betrayed me. He'd betrayed his professional obligations, his firm, his clients. The deception went deeper than I had imagined. Does this help our case? I asked. Enormously. Montgomery wants to avoid a scandal, so they're offering full cooperation with our forensic accountants. They'll provide transaction records that might lead us directly to the offshore accounts. In return, they want assurance that your case focuses on Cyrus individually, not the firm. By late afternoon, we had received the first batch of documents from Montgomery. Internal transaction logs showing Cyrus had been moving client funds through the same channels he'd used for our marital assets. The scale was staggering. What he'd done to our savings was just a small part of a much larger scheme. He's been running this for years, Patricia said, examining the transaction dates. Long before he started moving your money. That's when a terrible suspicion formed in my mind. Patricia, when did these transactions begin exactly? She flipped through the documents. The first ones date back about 3.5 years. 3.5 years, around the time of Cyrus's promotion, around the time his spending habits had changed, when our once conservative approach to finances had shifted. I need to make a call, I said suddenly. In the privacy of Patricia's conference room, I called a number I'd never expected to dial, the one for Curtis Blackwood at Montgomery. Financial? Mr. Blackwood? This is Shannon Winters. I have a question about my husband's promotion to senior investment director 3 years ago. There was a pause. What about it, Mrs. Winters? Was Jolene working at Montgomery at that time? Another, longer pause. Jolene Morgan was promoted to client relations director 4 years ago. She and Cyrus began working closely on the Westbrook portfolio shortly after. The final piece clicked into place. The affair, the financial fraud, the elaborate exit strategy? None. Of it was recent. They had been planning this for years, slowly positioning themselves, building their scheme piece by piece while I renovated our home and graded essays, believing in a marriage that had already been hollowed out from within. The depth of the betrayal was breathtaking. By Tuesday morning, the calm, methodical progression of our case hit its first major obstacle. I was having breakfast in Patricia's office, a bagel and coffee that I barely tasted, when her receptionist buzzed to inform her that Leon Matthews, Cyrus's attorney, was on the line. Patricia put the call on speaker, her expression neutral. Patricia Winters speaking. Ms. Winters, this is Leon Matthews representing Cyrus Winters. His voice was smooth, cultured, with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to high-stakes negotiations. I understand you filed some rather dramatic motions on behalf of Shannon Winters. We've filed appropriate motions given the circumstances, Mr. Matthews. Yes, well, about those circumstances. My client categorically denies any financial impropriety. The transfers in question were legitimate investment moves that Mrs. Winters was aware of and had previously approved. I opened my mouth to protest, but Patricia held up a warning hand. "Is that so?" she replied coolly. "We have extensive documentation suggesting otherwise." "Documentation which was obtained illegally," Matthews countered smoothly. "These alleged recordings violate Washington's two-party consent law. They're inadmissible, and frankly, their existence opens your client to potential criminal charges." Patricia didn't flinch. "Before making threats, Mr. Matthews, you might want to review the exceptions to that law, particularly those relating to evidence of financial crimes. Additionally, we have witness authentication of those recordings and bank records that stand on their own." There was a brief pause. "My client is prepared to be generous in settlement, despite your client's problematic methods. We're offering $50,000 and an expedited divorce with no further claims on Mr. Winters' assets or future earnings." The audacity was breathtaking. $50,000, a fraction of what he'd taken, a pittance compared to what we'd built together. Patricia's voice remained level. "That offer is declined. We'll see you at tomorrow's hearing, Mr. Matthews." After ending the call, Patricia turned to me. "That was just the opening salvo. They're testing to see if we'll back down easily." "He really thinks I'll settle for $50,000? I asked, incredulous. "He's following Cyrus's lead. They think you're financially naive and conflict-averse. Let them underestimate you. It works in our favor." But Leon Matthews wasn't done with us. By noon, we received notice that Cyrus's legal team had filed emergency counter motions, one challenging the asset freeze as unnecessarily restrictive, another questioning the legitimacy of our evidence, and a third claiming that I had abandoned the marital home and was hiding assets of my own. "Standard tactics," Patricia assured me after reviewing the filings. "They're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks." I was about to respond when my phone buzzed with a call from Crystal, my friend and colleague at school. I excused myself to answer. "Shannon?" Crystal's voice was hesitant. "Are you okay? There are rumors going around." My stomach dropped. "What kind of rumors?" "Cyrus called Principal Thornton this morning. He said you're having some kind of breakdown, that you've taken money from your joint accounts and disappeared." She paused. "He asked if anyone at school knew where you were staying, said he was worried about your mental health." The strategy was clear. Cyrus was trying to control the narrative, painting me as unstable and financially irresponsible, just as he'd done with Noah. "None of that is true," I said carefully. "Cyrus has been having an affair and emptying our accounts. I have proof, and I've filed for an emergency asset freeze. I'm staying somewhere safe while this gets sorted out legally." There was a long silence before Crystal spoke again. "That makes a lot more sense than what he was saying. Do you need anything? Support at school? I can talk to Thornton." "Just knowing you believe me helps," I admitted. "Has he contacted anyone else at school?" "He's been calling around to several faculty members, supposedly looking for you, but it felt off." After promising to keep her updated, I ended the call and returned to Patricia's office, where I relayed the conversation. "He's trying to isolate you," she said grimly. "Create doubt about your stability. Get people to pressure you to return home where he can better manipulate the situation." She tapped her pen against her legal pad. "We need to counter this narrative immediately." Within the hour, Patricia had drafted a formal letter to Principal Thornton explaining that I was involved in legal proceedings due to discovered financial impropriety and marital infidelity, and that any concerns about my whereabouts should be directed to her office. The letter was professional, factual, and subtly devastating to Cyrus's attempts to paint me as unstable. But Cyrus was getting desperate, and desperate men are dangerous. Late that afternoon, I received a text from our neighbor, Betty Hammond. "Shannon, just letting you know someone's been in your house. Lots of movement, boxes being carried out. Not just Cyrus, woman helping him. Everything okay? I showed the text to Patricia, who immediately called the police to report potential removal of assets under court freeze. She also contacted the judge's clerk to alert them to this development before tomorrow's hearing. While Patricia handled the legal response, I texted Betty back. Not Cyrus moving things. I've filed for divorce after discovering financial fraud. Court has frozen assets pending hearing. Please document anything you see being removed. Betty's response was immediate. OMG. Taking photos now. Within minutes, she sent several images showing Cyrus and a tall, elegant blonde woman, Jolene, I presumed, carrying boxes and artwork to a rental truck. Among the items I could clearly identify was my grandmother's antique mirror and several pieces of artwork that had been specifically listed in our asset documentation. This is actually helpful for us, Patricia said, examining the photos. He's openly violating the asset freeze and removing items from the marital home. The judge will not look kindly on this. She was right about that, but wrong about something else. Cyrus wasn't done applying pressure. At 7:42 p.m., my school email pinged with a message from an unfamiliar address, jmorgan@montgomeryfinancial.com. The subject line read simply, "You don't want to do this." Jolene. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Shannon, we've never met, but I feel like I know you through Cyrus. He's told me how kind you are, how reasonable. That's why I'm reaching out directly. This legal battle you've initiated will hurt everyone. You, Cyrus, me, his clients, your reputation. The recordings you made were illegal, and pursuing this will only result in criminal charges against you. Cyrus and I have been in love for years. He stayed with you out of obligation and guilt, but your marriage has been over for a long time. The financial arrangements he made were simply preparing for an inevitable transition. If you accept the settlement offer, you can walk away with dignity and security. If you fight, you'll lose everything, including your teaching career once it becomes known you secretly recorded private conversations. Choose wisely. Jolene Morgan, Director of Client Relations, Montgomery Financial Partners. I stared at the email, a curious sense of calm settling over me. The woman who had been sleeping with my husband for years, who had conspired with him to steal our joint savings, who had lurked in the shadows of my marriage, now presumed to lecture me about dignity. I forwarded the email to Patricia with a single question. Can we use this? Her response came within minutes. Absolutely. It's evidence of continued harassment and an attempt to intimidate a witness in a financial fraud case. Forward it to Curtis Blackwood at Montgomery as well. I suspect Ms. Morgan's employment status is about to change. The next morning, Wednesday, dawned clear and bright, a rarity for Seattle in spring. As I dressed for court in a simple black dress and the pearl earrings that had become something of a talisman, I felt strangely calm. Cyrus had deployed every weapon in his arsenal: legal threats, reputation attacks, removal of assets, direct intimidation. And yet I was still standing. More than standing. I was fighting back. By 9 a.m., I was seated beside Patricia in courtroom 4C, waiting for Judge Terrell to call our case. Across the aisle, Cyrus sat with Leon Matthews, immaculate. In a tailored suit, his expression a careful mask of injured innocence. He didn't look at me directly, but I felt his awareness of my presence like a physical pressure. The woman beside him, equally polished in a cream-colored suit, could only be Jolene. So this was the person for whom my husband had dismantled our life, piece by piece. She was beautiful in a calculated way, her face arranged in an expression of appropriate solemnity. Did she know she was seated in a courtroom because of financial fraud? Did she care? As the bailiff called the court to order, Patricia leaned close to whisper, "Remember, no matter what is said, no reactions. Let the evidence speak for itself." Nodded, my hands steady on the table before me. The hearing was about to begin, and for the first time, Cyrus would face the consequences of his actions in public. Judge Terrell was a woman in her late 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun and reading glasses perched at the end of her nose. She reviewed the motions before her with methodical precision, her expression giving away nothing. "We have several emergency motions before the court," she began, looking over her glasses at the assembled attorneys. "Ms. Winters is seeking to freeze marital assets pending divorce proceedings and requesting temporary financial support. Mr. Winters is challenging the evidentiary basis for these motions and alleging abandonment of the marital home." She turned to Patricia. "Ms. Winters, you may present your case." Patricia rose with calm confidence. "Your Honor, we have documented evidence of systematic financial fraud perpetrated by Mr. Winters against the marital estate." She presented the bank statements showing the pattern of withdrawals, the investment account liquidations, and Noah's affidavit confirming the authenticity of conversations recorded between Cyrus and various parties. "Additionally," Patricia continued, "we have photographic evidence that Mr. Winters has violated the temporary asset freeze by removing property from the marital home yesterday evening." She submitted Betty's time-stamped photos showing Cyrus and Jolene loading artwork and furniture into a rental truck. Leon Matthews was on his feet immediately. "Your Honor, these recordings were obtained illegally under Washington's two-party consent law. They should be excluded, and frankly, Mrs. Winters should be subject to criminal charges for making them." Judge Terrell's gaze was sharp. "Mr. Matthews, are you filing criminal charges against Mrs. Winters?" "Not at this time, Your Honor, but then let's address the admissibility issue." Judge Terrell turned to Patricia. "Ms. Winters, your response to the consent issue?" Patricia nodded. "Your Honor, while Washington is indeed a two-party consent state, there are specific exceptions for evidence of financial crimes. Additionally, we're not submitting the actual recordings at this time, merely Mr. Taylor's affidavit describing their contents, which is admissible as witness testimony." The judge considered this. "I'll allow the affidavit for purposes of this emergency hearing. The admissibility of the actual recordings can be determined at trial." She turned back to Leon. "Your response to the allegation that your client violated the temporary asset freeze?" Leon cleared his throat. "Your Honor, my client was merely relocating items for safekeeping, given that Mrs. Winters abandoned the marital home without notice." "Abandoned?" Patricia interjected. "Mrs. Winters relocated temporarily after discovering financial fraud and explicit plans to leave her destitute. And Mr. Winters was not safekeeping items. He was transporting them to an unknown location, with the assistance of his paramour, Ms. Morgan, who is present in court today." At this, heads turned toward Jolene, who maintained her composed expression despite the sudden attention. Judge Terrell frowned. "Mr. Matthews, your client was aware of the temporary asset freeze when removing these items?" "He received notice, Your Honor, but believed it applied only to financial assets, not personal property." The judge's expression made it clear she found this explanation lacking. "The order specifically included all marital assets, Mr. Matthews. Personal property is clearly covered." For the next hour, the attorneys argued back and forth. Leon claimed the financial transfers were legitimate investment activities that I had been aware of and approved. Patricia countered with bank records showing the acceleration of withdrawals, the removal of my name from accounts, and affidavits from both Noah and Curtis Blackwood detailing Cyrus's fraudulent activities. The tide turned decisively when Patricia presented Jolene's email. "Your Honor, this is an intimidation attempt sent by Ms. Morgan to my client just last night, threatening her career if she doesn't drop this case." Judge Terrell read the email, her expression darkening. "Ms. Morgan is present in court?" Jolene straightened in her seat, looking suddenly uncomfortable. "Yes, Your Honor," Patricia confirmed. "She's seated beside Mr. Winters." The judge addressed Jolene directly. "Ms. Morgan, are you aware that attempting to intimidate a party in a legal proceeding is a serious matter that could result in sanctions?" Jolene's composure cracked slightly. I was merely trying to— Don't respond, Leon cut in quickly. Ms. Morgan is not represented by counsel in this matter. Judge Terrell made a note. Very well. I'm prepared to rule on these motions. She adjusted her glasses and looked directly at Cyrus for the first time. Mr. Winters, based on the evidence presented, I find sufficient cause to maintain the freeze on all marital assets pending further proceedings. Additionally, I'm ordering that no further property be removed from the marital home by either party without court approval. She turned to me. Mrs. Winters, you are granted temporary support in the amount of $5,000 per month from Mr. Winters' personal accounts, which are not subject to the freeze. Additionally, Mr. Winters will continue to pay all household expenses for the marital home. Finally, she addressed both parties. I'm ordering a full forensic accounting of all marital finances going back 5 years, to be conducted by an independent accountant appointed by the court. Both parties will provide complete financial disclosures within 10 days. We will reconvene for a full hearing in 30 days. As we left the courtroom, I felt a mixture of relief and determination. This was just the opening round, but we had won it decisively. In the hallway, Cyrus approached me directly for the first time, his face tight with controlled anger. This is a mistake, Shannon. You have no idea what you're doing. Patricia stepped between us. Mr. Winters, all communication needs to go through counsel. He ignored her, his eyes fixed on mine. You think you've won something? This is just the beginning. I built everything we had. You contributed nothing. The words were meant to wound, to make me doubt myself, to remind me of my financial dependence. But they had the opposite effect. They reminded me of exactly why I was fighting. Actually, Cyrus, I said calmly, I contributed everything. Trust, loyalty, partnership, things you clearly never valued. Before he could respond, Leon pulled him away, whispering urgently in his ear. Jolene had already disappeared, nowhere, to be seen after the judge's rebuke. Outside the courthouse, under Seattle's perpetually gray sky, Patricia turned to me. That went better than expected. The judge clearly sees through his attempts to hide assets. What happens now? I asked. Now the real work begins. The forensic accountant will trace all the money, including the offshore accounts. We'll depose Cyrus, Jolene, and anyone else involved in the financial schemes. And we'll prepare for trial, though cases like this usually settle once the defendant realizes how much evidence we have. What Patricia couldn't have anticipated was how quickly the battlefield would expand beyond the courtroom. By the time I returned to my hotel room that afternoon, my phone was flooded with messages. The first was from Crystal. Principal Thornton. Received the letter from your attorney. He wants you to know your job is secure and to take whatever time you need. The next was from Betty. More boxes being removed from your house. Called police as instructed. They're there now. Then came a series of texts from friends and colleagues, some expressing support, others asking confused questions about rumors they'd heard. Word was spreading fast. Most surprising was a voicemail from Curtis Blackwood. Mrs. Winters, we need to speak urgently. There have been developments at Montgomery Financial regarding your husband's activities. Please call me as soon as possible. When? I returned his call. Curtis's voice was tense. There's no easy way to say this. We've completed our preliminary audit, and the scope of Mr. Winters's misappropriation is substantial. Over $4.2 million in client funds have been diverted through the shell company structure. I sat down heavily on the hotel bed. $4 million? At minimum. The SEC has been notified and criminal charges are likely forthcoming. Mrs. Winters, I have to ask, did you have any knowledge of these activities? None, I assured him. I just discovered the fraud against our marital assets last week. That's consistent with our findings. I wanted to warn you. This is about to become public. The firm will be issuing a statement tomorrow, and the financial press will certainly cover it. He was right. By Thursday morning, Cyrus's name was splashed across the business section of the Seattle Times. Montgomery financial director suspended amid fraud allegations. The article detailed the ongoing investigation into client fund misappropriation, mentioned the pending divorce proceedings, and noted that both civil and criminal charges were being considered. What had begun as a private betrayal was now a public scandal. Cyrus Winters, respected investment director, was being revealed as a fraud on multiple fronts. And somewhere in all of this, I realized something important. I was no longer just fighting for my financial survival. I was fighting for justice, for myself, for Cyrus's clients, for everyone he had deceived with his carefully constructed facade of integrity. The week after the hearing transformed my understanding of what we were facing. Patricia assembled a team that included not just legal experts, but also a forensic accountant named Vince, who specialized in uncovering hidden assets. "We're no longer just dealing with a divorce case," Patricia explained during our strategy meeting. "We're potentially dealing with criminal financial fraud. That changes everything." Vince, a soft-spoken man with meticulous attention to detail, had already begun tracing the money trail. He was clever, but not as clever as he thought, he told us, spreading out diagrams showing the flow of funds. The Cayman accounts connect to a shell company in Panama, which then feeds into another entity in the British Virgin Islands. "Can we recover any of it?" I asked, staring at the complex web of transactions. "Some, definitely. The court-appointed forensic accountant will have subpoena powers we don't, which will help. But more importantly, we can prove intent to defraud, which strengthens both your divorce case and potential criminal charges." Patricia nodded. "The SEC investigation actually works in our favor. They have resources we don't, and their findings will be admissible in your divorce proceedings." Meanwhile, Cyrus's world was collapsing. Montgomery Financial had placed him on unpaid leave pending the investigation. The SEC had frozen his personal accounts, separate from our marital assets, and according to Noah, who had become an unexpected ally, several major clients were preparing lawsuits against both Cyrus and the firm. Leon Matthews called Patricia 3 times that week with settlement offers, each more generous than the last. The final offer would have given me the house, a lump sum of $500,000, and my choice of vehicles. "He's getting desperate," Patricia observed. "But it's still significantly less than your rightful share, especially given the fraud." I didn't hesitate. "No deal. I want everything he tried to hide. I want the truth fully exposed." The truth was indeed emerging, piece by piece. Vince discovered that the San Juan property had been purchased with funds directly traced to our joint accounts, funds that had been moved without my knowledge or consent. He also uncovered a lease for a luxury apartment in downtown Seattle, rented 6 months earlier in Jolene's name, but paid for from one of Cyrus's shell companies. "They've been planning this exit for a long time," Vince confirmed. Most damning of all were the emails recovered through the SEC investigation, correspondence between Cyrus and Jolene dating back nearly 4 years, discussing not just their affair, but their financial plans. "I'm setting up the offshore structure," Cyrus had written in one email. "Once everything's in place, we can start moving the real money. S will never know. She trusts me completely with our finances." Reading those words, seeing how my trust had been not just betrayed but mocked, solidified my resolve. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about justice. Patricia laid out our next steps. We continue cooperating with the SEC investigation. We prepare for depositions, and we gather every piece of evidence showing the systematic nature of this fraud. I nodded, a steely determination replacing the shock and hurt that had initially driven me. "I'm ready." 1 month after our initial hearing, we returned to court for what would become the defining moment of the case. The courtroom was more crowded this time, not just legal teams, but also representatives from the SEC, the district attorney's office, and even a few financial reporters who had been covering the expanding scandal. Cyrus looked markedly different. The polished, confident investment director had been replaced by a man visibly under strain. His suit still fit perfectly, but his face showed the toll of the investigations and impending criminal charges. Jolene was conspicuously absent. Judge? Terrell called the court to order and turned immediately to the court-appointed forensic accountant, who presented his findings in meticulous detail. Your Honor, my investigation has uncovered systematic fraud dating back approximately 4 years. Mr. Winters diverted approximately $287,650 from joint marital accounts to offshore holdings, primarily in the Cayman Islands and Panama. He displayed charts showing the money trail. These diversions were deliberately concealed from Mrs. Winters and occurred without her knowledge or consent. The accountant continued. Additionally, Mr. Winters purchased real estate, specifically a property on Lopez Island valued at $1.2 million, using marital funds but titled the property solely in his name. Judge Terrell turned to Cyrus. Mr. Winters, do you wish to respond to these findings? Leon Matthews rose quickly. Your Honor, while we dispute some of the characterizations, my client is prepared to offer a complete settlement that addresses all outstanding issues. The judge raised an eyebrow. Proceed. My client offers Mrs. Winters the Seattle residence, full restoration of all diverted marital funds with interest, half ownership of the Lopez Island property, and an additional $500,000 in compensatory damages. Patricia leaned over to whisper to me. He's capitulating completely. This is more than we would likely get even with a favorable judgment. I considered for only a moment before nodding. Patricia rose. Your Honor, my client is willing to accept the financial terms, with several conditions. First, Mr. Winters must acknowledge in writing the deliberate nature of his financial misconduct. Second, any non-disclosure agreement must exclude Mrs. Winters' cooperation with ongoing criminal investigations. Leon started to object, but Cyrus placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. He whispered something to his attorney, who looked surprised, but nodded reluctantly. We accept those conditions, Your Honor, Leon said. Judge Terrell looked at me directly. Mrs. Winters, do you understand and accept this settlement? I stood, my voice steady. I do, Your Honor. Very well. The court will approve this settlement upon submission of the final documents. Mr. Winters. She fixed Cyrus with a stern gaze. This settlement resolves the civil matters between you and Mrs. Winters, but does not affect any criminal proceedings that may arise from your actions. As we filed out of the courtroom, Cyrus approached me one last time. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that almost resembled shame. Shannon, he began, his voice low. I never meant— Save it, Cyrus, I interrupted quietly. The recordings made it very clear exactly what you meant. You just didn't expect to get caught. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. What happens now? I looked at him, this stranger I'd been married to for 12 years, and felt nothing but a calm certainty. Now I rebuild my life. What happens to you is no longer my concern. As I walked away, I realized it was true. The man who had tried to destroy my future had lost all power over me. I was free. The settlement agreement was finalized 2 weeks later. I sat in Patricia's office, pen in hand, staring at the document that officially ended my marriage and secured my financial future. Once you sign, the funds will be transferred within 5 business days, Patricia explained. The Seattle house and your half interest in the Lopez Island property will be titled solely in your name. The numbers on the page still seemed surreal. Full restoration of the $287,650 taken from our joint accounts, plus interest, half ownership of the $1.2 million vacation property, and $500,000 in additional compensation. More than fair by any legal standard. Yet no amount of money could compensate for the betrayal, the years lost to deception. That wasn't something the courts could address. What about Cyrus? I asked. The criminal investigation? Patricia's expression was grim but satisfied. The SEC has filed formal charges for securities fraud and misappropriation of client funds. The district attorney is pursuing criminal charges for financial fraud. He's facing potential prison time and will likely never work in finance again. And Jolene? Montgomery Financial terminated her employment. While she hasn't been criminally charged, her professional reputation is essentially destroyed. The emails between them made it clear she was aware of and participated in the scheme. I signed my name on the final page, feeling a curious mixture of closure and new beginning. This chapter was ending, but another was just starting. That same day, Curtis Blackwood called to inform me that Montgomery Financial had reached a settlement with the affected clients, making them whole financially while avoiding public litigation. He also mentioned, somewhat awkwardly, that the firm would be making a substantial donation to my school's scholarship fund as a goodwill gesture. 1 month later, I received notification that Cyrus had pleaded guilty to reduced charges in exchange for cooperation with authorities investigating broader financial crimes. He would serve 18 months in a minimum security facility, followed by 5 years of probation. His legal career, his reputation, his carefully constructed image of success, all destroyed by his own actions. I didn't feel the satisfaction I'd expected, just a quiet relief that justice had been served, and that chapter of my life was finally, completely over. As I packed up the last of my belongings from the hotel room that had been my temporary sanctuary, I reflected on how much had changed in just 3 months. I had gone from a woman blindsided by betrayal to someone who had fought back and reclaimed not just financial security, but personal power. The recordings that had started it all, those small devices hidden in the house I once shared with Cyrus, had been the key that unlocked the truth. Without them, I might never have discovered the full extent of his deception until it was too late. Sometimes the most powerful weapon against deception is simply the truth, captured in a moment when someone thinks no one is listening. 6 months. After the settlement, I stood in the garden of my Seattle home, now truly mine alone, watching the autumn leaves drift from the Japanese maple Cyrus and I had planted years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. This tree, like so much of what we'd built together, would continue to grow and thrive long after our marriage had withered and died. I'd return to teaching, finding unexpected comfort in the classroom routine. My colleagues had been supportive, Principal Thornton particularly so. The scandal had rippled through Seattle's financial community, but within the walls of my school, I was still just Ms. Winters, the English teacher who loved Jane Austen and assigned too many essays. Crystal stopped by often, bringing dinner and conversation. Betty from next door kept me updated on neighborhood gossip and helped me replant the garden beds. More wildflowers, fewer rigid rows, she'd suggested. A metaphor I embraced. The Lopez Island property, my half of it anyway, had been sold. The proceeds reinvested in a small foundation providing financial literacy education for women. It felt right, transforming something built on deception into a resource for empowerment. I hadn't heard from Cyrus directly since the courthouse. Occasionally, I saw updates about his case in the business section of the paper, each one smaller than the last as public interest waned. Jolene had apparently relocated to Phoenix, according to Crystal's surprisingly effective grapevine. Their grand plan for a new life together had collapsed under the weight of their deception. People often ask if I regret placing those recording devices. If I wish I could have remained in blissful ignorance a little longer. I never do. The truth, however painful, set me free from a life built on lies. Had I not discovered Cyrus's betrayal when I did, had I not heard his plans in his own words, I might have found myself truly destitute, my reputation destroyed, questioning my own sanity as he systematically dismantled our life. Instead, I found my strength. I found allies. I found justice. Trust is a precious thing. Once broken, It can never be fully restored. But trust in yourself, in your instincts, in your capacity to rebuild. That's a foundation no one can steal. If you're watching this and something in your relationship doesn't feel right, unexplained financial movements, emotional distance, stories that don't quite add up, trust that feeling. Investigate. Protect yourself. You don't have to face it alone. Some people say surviving betrayal makes you bitter. I disagree. It makes you wiser, more compassionate toward others in similar situations, more appreciative of genuine relationships. It teaches you to value transparency and to recognize red flags you might once have ignored. My name is Shannon Winters. 3 years ago, I discovered my husband was secretly transferring our life savings to his mistress. Today, I'm financially secure, professionally fulfilled, and emotionally free. The recordings captured his betrayal, but they also recorded my awakening, and that made all the difference. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment below. Share your own story if you feel comfortable, or just let me know what city you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of resilience and transformation. Remember, the most important voice to listen to is the one inside you that says something isn't right. Trust it. It's usually trying to protect you. Until next time, stay strong, stay vigilant, and know your worth. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.